Rage Badger Gaming here, and we're going to be going over the last of the Frosthaven starters, in this case the Inox Drifter, which is actually my favorite of the starters now. I kind of warmed up to it thinking it was kind of a semi-basic class that maybe one of us would end up playing, but through some of the playtesting experience, I've suddenly realized that this is clearly one of the most fun classes to play and something I'm definitely going to be jumping into come the Frosthaven campaign when we eventually all get it. If you want to be kept up to date with all of our fun Frosthaven content, be sure to subscribe. Thank you. So the Inox Drifter has a large hand size of 12, which is necessary because he will be playing losses, and has a good health pool. Now, no matter how you build the Inox Drifter, you probably should use that health pool to your advantage to take some hits, even though you can kind of play a little bit more support or ranged if you do desire to do that. But he has a lot of melee or tanky stuff, so if you really want to focus more in that, it's definitely an option. The biggest feature of the Inox Drifter is that he puts these losses into play that buffs up his actions. Unfortunately, a lot of his action cards are very behind the curve, but because he can permanently buff a lot of his actions, it ends up that those somewhat weak cards turn out to be pretty strong. Of course, it isn't actually permanent. They have a limited number of charges before they fall off, but you have ways to get those back. So you have to develop a play style that kind of gives you a balance between like managing the charges and managing effective turns, because you have some cards that literally say your top half is doing nothing this turn, but you're recharging a little bit. And you do have a perk that says you can long rest, which you give up a turn for but get a charge back, and so on and so forth. So and you can actually manage your attack modifier deck with perks that give you, instead of +1s, give you more +0s, but allow you to get charges back, allowing you to almost play more aggressively, because you'll be able to get your charges back just naturally by attacking. And being able to get 4 of those modifiers in your deck where you're just going to naturally get a charge just by taking an attack means you can have a more aggressive playstyle that doesn't involve all of your losses falling off. So we're going to first start talking about the basic card, Crushing Weight. Crushing Weight is basically what a lot of new players will probably be jumping into, and honestly it's probably one of the best cards, just giving you +2 to all your melee attacks. It doesn't really get better than that if you really want to become a melee bruiser, or a tank that just obviously are going to be probably doing some attacks through the scenario, although I'll be making references to Spiky Ball, which we'll get into later around level 4 cards. But Crushing Weight just gives you solid melee attacks, and the bottom half's actually really strong if you don't want to go the melee build, allowing you to perform a ranged heal with a bottom action, which is already pretty good, and you can actually move one of your tokens around. So just getting a recharge plus a heal, especially if you use this with another card we'll talk about soon, Continuous Health, giving a nice little heal 4 will be huge. But the biggest thing is you're just largely going to be using this for a big attack boost in melee, and it's strong. But a lot of these things we're going to be discussing the trackers, and then we'll get into more of the nuance of playing the Drifter as we get to the cards that actually require you to regain charges and do attacks. So Sustained Momentum is another one of those that gets recharges. The top half is an attack 2 or an attack 4 with Crushing Weight that also gives you your charge back. So in most cases when I played Sustained Momentum's top, it ended up being attack 4 and 1 experience and really no other effects, which is pretty decent for a level 1. A little bit behind the Mind Thief, but that's okay. It allows you to effectively, in the name, sustain momentum. The bottom half of Sustain Momentum, however, is another one of those bonuses. For the next 6 moves, you get to get +2 move. Now, a lot of times, this is very good, because sometimes you will want this in a scenario, and you'll be like, oh, I need to move, I need to get across there, because there's just some scenarios where you will need maneuverability either to get there and back again, or just being able to clear some areas. And there's some in Gloomhaven that are absolutely like that, and Frosthaven brings the return of some of those scenarios. Just having that ability to bring this, but also have a good melee top, means that a lot of drifters will just bring this because just in case I have this bottom, but the top is also good. Precision Aim is nerfed kind of from the original version we saw, which is +2 to all ranged attacks, and now it's +1 range and +1 attack. Actually, this doesn't really make the ranged attacker any worse. The ranged attacking build certainly does worse damage now than the melee build. However, the melee build requires you to get into melee, and the range damage build, when I say in a vacuum, it does less damage. However, because you have such good reach, and there's several attacks where you can reach out to like range 5, for example, and even one of the starting items can get you out to range 6, it means that you're really never in a position to not be able to perform attacks. And not having dead turns kind of improves your damage anyway. Plus, it gives you the versatility of being able to attack extra long enemies that are very far away. And when you get to fighting Algok's archers, which is literally right off the bat, you will be wanting that range because they're nasty. And the bottom half's really great too. And I love the fact that this got moved here, because this means that if you're going the range build, you don't get the bonus for move 2 and push a tracker back. This means that the range build won't have the benefit of being able to move and adjust initially off of this very easy to use card, but now the melee build has access to it. And the melee and tank builds are the ones that generally wanted more mobility, so it's good that this was a good switch. But precision aim not only giving you good range and good damage means that if you're going for a range build, you're going to be better than like some of the other starters, honestly. The drifters ranges, now some of them got very nerfed, like draining arrows got dropped to range 2, which we'll talk in shortly, but the fact that it's got both options are very good. A lot of times most builds will just bring the bottom, but if you're going to be a ranged attacker, it is mandatory. Continuous health. So if you are going a ranged build, this is a strong one for you, because it's a range 2 at attack 2, but with precision aim, attack 3, range 3, and usually you get your experience from it. So it's a very strong card. I mean, for a level 1 non-loss. But other than that, if you're not using precision aim, the top isn't super great, but the bottom, your next 6 heals heal 2 more. Now this isn't like heals on abilities, these are just heals, period. So if you long rest, that means you heal 4. If you pop a like 3 healing potion, that's a 5 healing potion. All of your heals get better. Just take note of that. It's amazing. Now, of course, you have a lot of self-healing sustain, but this is the one that I think for people starting out for the Drifter, I think continuous health and crushing weight is the best combo. And I'm not a person to typically say, hey, pick these cards, and then when you level up, remove this. I think that kind of mentality is something we need to toss away. And a lot of people have embedded that into like guides and stuff saying, do this. And you really should keep a pool of cards and figure out what's best for the scenario, and that's really the reason for success. But some people, I guess, don't want that, and I guess what I'm trying to say is the Drifter is one of the best at that, but some people think, oh, there's so many options, this is so overwhelming. And honestly, the Drifter can do so much that maybe it could be overwhelming, but it's very hard to not do crushing weight, continuous health effectively. So I think a lot of people could just jump in and go, oh, all these starters seem hard. Just do Drifter with those 2 losses, and you should be able to walk your way through the game. Relentless. Relentless is another card I used a lot. The top half is very good for between rooms, or like if you have a dead turn, or you know that you're not really going to be able to do anything. Just getting 2 charges back is decent. It's not good if you're in the middle of a fight, but it's pretty decent. The bottom half is a very nice Retaliate, because it's a Retaliate 2 at range 2. So even if you base ranged enemies, one of the most annoying things is when you would like move next to a ranged enemy or or even a melee enemy, then they're like, hey, I'm doing a ranged attack this turn, so I'm going to back 1 hex out, and you're not getting a Retaliate. And that's frustrating. So the fact it's range 2, that's very good. Also notice it doesn't burn charges if you get attacked from far away. So you aren't ever going to be losing a charge. And a lot of times I would end up using Relentless for like times where we would get enemies down pretty low, and we since we were playing on harder difficulties when we were testing Frosthaven, sometimes we would need to like have some action economy. We're like, oh, that guy's at 1 or 2 health. Let him attack me. Maybe he'll do like a weak attack, and then the Retaliate will drop him. We can focus on these others. So sometimes we ended up eating hits just to be able to let them fall off that way, or using this as a way, I'm going to charge in. Oh, I drew really well. I brought them to 2 health, and then they attacked me, and that Relentless ended up dropping them a bit. So this ended up being pretty significant. I thought it was a pretty good card, but I think it's actually far more valuable than I initially thought, just from our testing, because we've tested a lot. I've done a lot of Drifter testing. It's my most played Frosthaven class that I've tested, so you can click. it's one of those. If you actually want to shoot the comments, we can give more examples, but I really should move on to the next card. Unbreakable. Unbreakable's top is the same as Relentless, so we won't go over that, but the bottom is something I'm not super fond of because it really only stops about 6 damage. It's more preventative than Continuous Health, which can kind of soak up 12, but you have to be reactive and you have to play cards. Whereas Unbreakable, you specifically have to be, suffer damage, and then it stops the damage as it comes in. There's a better card in the later card levels that I like a lot better, but I didn't end up using Unbreakable very much as a result, and I don't know, I'm not super fond of it. Just because I think in another class it might be better, but just because of the Drifter has like weaker actions that I like a lot of the more active increasing a lot of them are action increasing abilities like Crushing Weight, Precision Aim, and Continuous Health, as opposed to just the passive things, even though I know Relentless is very good. Vile Assault. So Vile Assault is fantastic. First off, 27 initiative is alright, but also move 2, heal 2. Between if you have Sustained Momentum or Continuous Health in play, this can be actually very powerful. A lot of times I would use this with Continuous Health to move 2 just to adjust my position, heal 4, and then that gives me, first off, heal 4 is really nice, and then you have the ability to just do a top half and be able to continue your turn. So this allows you to, first off, reposition so you don't need to worry about like burning a card to move, but also gives you some healing, and it can trigger Continuous Health for large amounts of healing. This is something that we used so many times to get through so many scenarios successfully, to the point where Vile Assault was a mandatory card almost, maybe even up to level 9 actually. So it's a really strong card. And the top half is actually really great because you can do so much damage. I know it seems very innocuous. Attack 2, poison, attack 2, wound. Okay, with Crushing Weight, if you actually attack the same target twice, attack 4, which is good, and then poison, attack 5. So assuming you just draw zeros, that's 9 damage plus wound. So on average, on a basic deck, that's 10 damage plus potentially more because you leave them poisoned and wounded. And the thing is, you can actually split the attacks if you know you need to take this thing out and this thing out. I actually recall a scenario very early on when I was playing Vile Assault, saving this for the last room, just allowing myself to heal a couple times, and then charged in at this big elite Algox Archer, and then hit it twice using advantage with the Spyglass, and it ended up bringing it right down to 1 health, and the wound ticked it off. And the Elite Archer was kicking. Honestly, the Elite Algox were just completely murdering us to the point where I felt like, oh, it gave us some breathing room. And I didn't realize this bursts out so much damage. And not only that, but on a decent, not great initiative, plus a very good bottom, this is pretty much an all-star card. Draining Arrows. So Draining Arrows is actually really good in every build. First off, move 3 and being able to just gain a charge if you're next to exactly 1 monster is still pretty solid. It's actually sometimes better than Sustained Momentum, so some people are really going to like that. Plus the initiative 23 is again decent. For a melee build, if you actually are just kind of tanking, and part of our spiky ball build, which I'll be talking about, sometimes just tossing out 3 muddles is just good enough. And that's really what this card is. You touch out a bunch of muddles, and then depending on what you roll, you can get like, if you have very, very good like a modifier deck, like to get charges back, just being able to draw 3 is really good. But if you have Precision Aim, this chucks out 3 attack 2s and a muddle on a non-lost card. And you'll probably get some experience in the process. You'll need to spend some effort to get those charges back, but this is a very strong card on both ends as a result. Prudent Preparation, I wasn't super fond of it first, actually. I didn't play this super often. But the thing is, 14 initiative is hard to beat. The Drifter doesn't have very many good initiatives. Shield and Retaliate is a very good combination because at the very least you can, sometimes if you're like, I want to retaliate this turn, but you take a bunch of damage. Having both of them in tandem is just strong because you'll at least be able to say, hey, I'm taking some hits this turn, but I'm going to take reduced hits. And with Relentless, with this, you can retaliate 3 damage onto every enemy. Paired with the good initiative, like you're going to be beating out like some of the guards' initiative 15s, and some of the archers has a very annoying initiative 14 as well. You'll often be going before and being able to get the shield up ahead of time. Not only that, but the bottom half, it gives you an early initiative that you can either do into a heal 2 or a move 2. And honestly, the heal 2 with Continuous Health, being able to go super early, heal yourself for 4, kind of has bailed me out just a couple times. So I wasn't super fond of this at first, but through testing, I grew more. It became more critical and more into the rotation. Although at later levels, actually, even low mid levels, it did get rotated out. But at early levels, it's still very strong, and plus it's hard to get a very good initiative on the Drifter. Deadly Shot. This is good for any build. First off, if you're precision aim, getting a range 5, great. Poison, great. Attack 2, great. Everyone else gets a move 4, which, I mean, honestly, the Drifters have been having problems with mobility from what we've been reading so far. So this is mandatory because you need a move 4. Every class should bring a move 4, like, to every scenario. There's very few scenarios, not every scenario, but there are very few scenarios where you won't find a move 4 to be useful. So I took this all the time. There's some cards that have move 4 and other effects later, but so I rotated it out, of course, but it ended up being very important through the early levels. Bloodletting. Bloodletting's really strong because it gives you, first off, an attack 5 non-loss at level 1, which is good, and you could potentially get charges back if you kill the enemy. Not only that, but you get charges back from killing an enemy on a strong attack. So that's one of those that pairs well. Like if it was a weak attack, but you maybe get a charge back, that's not good. But the fact that you conditionally get a charge back on a big attack, worst case scenario, it's a good attack. Not only that, but the bottom is really strong because with Crushing Weight, it's an attack 3 wound on bottom. So how many classes get access to an attack 3 wound non-loss on bottom? It's not so much. So if you find yourself in melee and you need to actually double attack and you need burst single target damage, here it is. With Sustained Momentum non-loss, you can do on average after the wound 8 damage, which is a very ahead of the curve level 1 turn. Violent Inheritance. So Violent Inheritance is very good because I'm basically saying that about every card. Every card is very good. And that's a problem with the Drifter because a lot of times people will be like, well, what cards do I bring? Again, look at the scenario and find what's suited to it. But this is actually extra important because you're going to need a lot of looting. Building up the settlement and getting the correct resources is not so easy. It's not like you just walk through Gloomhaven, draw cards until you get like, hey, prosperity, yeah, blah, hey, we retired, yay, prosperity, hey, let's do this event, prosperity. You need to actively find what resources you need to build up that part of the settlement. Like, guys, we need more wood to build up for the fortifications because when winter comes, we're going to get our asses kicked. So we found that we ended up leaning a little bit more on the loot cards then, because sometimes we're just like, oh, well, we'll scoot through, pick up what we can, and get to the end. We had to loot more cards to keep up. So Violent Inheritance with Crushing Weight is an attack 3, and then after you hit the enemy, you loot 1. If you kill the enemy with that attack 3, you get to loot it and get everything else. So this is really important. Even if you're just, using this for the loot, top loot, you can move to the correct position and loot because it's a top loot. So it's a good card. And the bottom half is a nice loss because move 4, even a move 4 and a loss, if you need to reposition later, and it gives you a nice attack 3 at range 3. If you're doing a precision aim, this could give you right into the correct position and a decent attack on bottom that you can still do the top attack and burst out some more damage as well. So Fortitude is one of your best attacks. This used to be like an annoyingly like you can like supercharge 1 instead of like moving 2 trackers back, move 1 tracker back twice, which is really good. And you also had the thing where whenever you kill an enemy, you'd get charges back. It still has the kill an enemy, get charges back, and that's still good. But now you have to make the decision. And this is an X, but this is nearly mandatory at several levels. So I don't consider it an X. This is a must-take card. So if you kill an enemy, get a persistent charge back. Boom. But you also have to pick that between Fortitude. So first off, it's an attack 3. So with Crushing Weight, attack 5, pierce 2. Yikes. That's super hard hitting. And also there's several like shield 2 enemies, and then later they get a little higher later, but there's a really annoying shielded enemies in Frosthaven. So this is gonna be great. But if you're ranged, with precision aim and burning 2 charges, because you could burn 1 for precision aim and burn 1 from any other card, this becomes an attack 4, range 4, pierce 2. So being able to have that good range, that good attack with pierce, it's hard to complain about how really strong this card is. No Remorse. So this is actually a card I didn't like at first, but it's rotational for my opinion now. With continuous health, first off, initiative 20 is good. And then heal 5 with continuous health at range 3 is really strong. Not only that, but I found that sometimes we would clear rooms out, we'd have dead turns, and I had to figure out what to do with them. And sometimes we would need to recover more, and with my tankier builds, this ended up being a really strong option. But not only that, but the bottom is actually really good, because if you have Crushing Weight in play, it gives you a significant amount of mobility. Move 3, attack 5, move 2. So you can go right to where you need to be and bust out a very strong bottom attack and then still keep going. And then you still have your top action. So it's a strong card, but I found that it was a tad situational for me. It's much better than the original version. So it's still, X is the right rank for it because it's good, but I don't bring it to every scenario. And through later levels, it ended up being permanently rotated out. Destructive Fury is a card I wanted to like, then didn't like, then ended up liking. It's rotational. Again, it deserves its X rank. So the bottom half is actually really strong because I think people don't they don't consider that it's a bottom half ranged attack. So if you have precision aim, you attack 4 on all of those hexes, and then you still have your top half, allowing you a significant amount of burst. The Destructive Fury's top half, on the other hand, gives you a huge AoE. Well, I guess it's only 5 hexes, but with Crushing Weight, that's an attack 5 on all of them. Unfortunately, since it's a double loss, which I'm not a fan of, a lot of the times in the scenario, it's a initiative 19 move 2, which initiative 19 is very good. So even just having a pocket initiative 19 is good. But there's one scenario where I know it bailed us out because the last room I thought we weren't going to be able to handle, but I realized that they positioned around us in a way I could attack 4 of them. And then I played Destructive Fury, almost ran out of my Crushing Weight it got on the last pip, and then dished out over 20 damage on my top action and was able to recover some, take some hits from the survivors, and suddenly the room, we still had someone exhaust, but we managed to actually survive it. So just remembering, hey, if you need burst AoE damage, the Drifter has it. Like, okay, fine, this card's good. But it's situational and rotational. So now we're going to be getting into the higher level cards. So here's something that's interesting. Shockwave. Shockwave was a card I didn't like because the old version was you have to attack an enemy and then all enemies adjacent to that suffer 1 damage if there are enemies adjacent. The whole point is 1 damage wasn't enough. So, but what now it's better than is instead of all enemies, only 1 adjacent enemy and 2 damage. This ends up being really good because if you actually don't care about being like tanky or healy and it's like, I just want to kick ass. Crushing Weight plus Shockwave, you can actually like attack, boom, +2 attack. Is there another enemy? Suffer 2 damage. Not only that, but it's suffer damage, so you can attack enemies that are next to shielded enemies and then splash the 2 right onto a shield person and just break through that barrier. So it's stronger now, but I've only tested this version a minimal amount of times. That said, it doesn't matter because the bottom half is really good. So what if you're fighting a scenario where you're not going to be able to really have this splash effect? You're like, well, this is my level 2 card. The bottom half giving you an initiative 17, good. Remember I was bitching about initiative? This is where it kind of gets fixed. Move 3, shield oneself. So if you're going to position yourself to be a little tanky, you can reposition, get a nice shield on a good initiative, which is kind of hard to complain about on a bottom action. And so for a level 2 card, this is actually pretty strong. But the top half, I was so used to the early version that I haven't, since that change is a more recent playtesting change on the release, so it's not something that we've gotten too much experience with, but I'm actually pretty pumped from my I've only actually played the top half 1 time since the change. Oops. Ever Forward is decent. Just let's do the bottom first because I like it. Heal 1, target 3, range 3. So if you have, again, so let's continuous health this. 3 heal 3s. Holy shit. Now, you can't just heal 3 the same target multiple times, but you can really bring up a party and make them go Ever Forward. Great name. Anyway, but that's the thing I really like about Ever Forward is you have this big multi-heal. So if that's something you need, it's good. Remember how I said also that no matter what drifter you build, support or ranged or tanky, you should be taking hits? Well, the top half gives you a nice solid ranged attack with an attack 2 or 3 with precision aim. So attack 3, range 4 with precision aim is a solid card, but then also you get to regenerate self. So if you took some hits and like, la la la, I've taken some, this allows you to recuperate by putting a regenerate on yourself in the middle of still doing a ranged attack. Fierce Barrage. So if you are a ranged attacker for this one, your next 6 range attacks add another target. With precision aim, you'll be burning through a lot of your charges really quickly, but this allows you to have multi-target significant burst damage, just being able to play one attack and hit multiple enemies, play one attack, hit multiple. It's very strong. The top attack is nice if you can get enemies light up in that battle axe formation, so you can do a couple of attack 4s with crushing weight. Dual bow, however, is if you prefer this, you can actually get a nice little a pair of attack 3, range 3, target 2 with precision aim. Now, a lot of the other melee builds won't favor that, but the bottom half's still really good with moving 2 of your tokens back 4. So if you've burned out a lot and like, oh no, they're gonna fall off, reset 2 of your abilities almost to the beginning, because even if you're at the last spot, now moving it to the back 4 spaces gives you at least 4 more charges of it. So it's just a really strong boss here. And also keep in mind, that's actually going to give you a lot of experience in the process, because if you've moved to the end on 2 different trackers, you've gotten at least from those cards like 5 or 6 experience, depending on which pip they're on. And then resetting them allows you to get 4 more experience. That's a lot right there. We're just talking about 2 losses, this card, and then burning some charges. It doesn't matter what the rest of the cards say for the rest of that scenario. You're talking 9 or 10 experience from getting these charges and using them. Gift of Prey is actually, for getting into level 4 cards, I actually prefer the other level 4 card, but let's talk about Gift of Prey here. Move 4 is already a good enough card. That's strong, but for a level 4, you clearly want better than just a regular move 4. So if you killed an enemy this round, you also get a charge back. So if you're positioned where you can hit an enemy, boom, kill him, then you can get a good movement and get a charge back all in one bottom action. That's still strong. Gift of Prey's top is actually really strong as well, because if you're doing the precision aim build, attack 4, range 4 is good. And then if this kills them, you get that charge back. It's much better than the lower level was attack 2, 3, 2. The lower level has an attack 2, range 2 that gives you a charge back unconditionally. This one's a little bit more conditional, but you get more range, good, and more damage, good. Chunk of Flesh, that's a name. So when I was talking about Spiky Ball, this is where the build started, because we'd used Chunk of Flesh with Relentless and just try to maintain like how much self-healing can we do with a shield 2, retaliate 2 guy popping shield, like preparation to turn him into shield 3, retaliate 3 this turn, and then other stuff like that. And we realized like this is the dub build. We just want to try it out to see how it does. And it's actually good. Like I thought it was a joke at first, because we actually, during some scenarios, it would be Chunk of Flesh, continuous health, and relentless. But we realized like, hey, if you just constantly retaliate, heal 4, like, because you can actually, or then there's some heal 5s in there. We realized like we quickly burn through these charges, and then using like the top half of Unbreakable to get 2 charges back. And we realized just recharge, and then doing some actions like draining arrows, like, hey, you 3 are muddled, but now you have to attack me, but I have shield. So like a lot of times just 3 attacks with disadvantage against shield 2, then burn off those charges, find ways to get them back. Like even with draining arrows, we actually stacked the deck with the perk that said replace one of your +1s with multiple +0s that also recharge your charges. Well, if you just draw a bunch of attacks, if you're just multi-attacking for the sake of drawing cards, it gives you a little bit of pressure. And also draining arrows gives you disadvantage, but also just forcing yourself to re-get these charges that way, and then also keep sustaining your shield 2. Wow, it was actually really, really strong. And not only that, but you don't even need the bottom. The top half's actually great in its own. So if you have like the crushing weight, continuous health, this is an attack 4, heal 4, and then you get one of those charges back. Not conditionally, like if you do this, you get the charge back. Amazing. So this card is already very strong. This is one of those where like I'd pair this with Violet Salt too. Like let's move 2 to get close to that enemy, heal 4 self, boom, attack 4, heal 4 self, and let's get a charge back and realize like I just healed 8 without burning any losses or items. And that kind of quick recovery was one of the really fun things that let us like realize this drifter is just, it's fun because you constantly feel like you can keep yourself in the fight. Survivalist. So remember how I said you can kind of play a little support? Or if you're a little tanky, Survivalist is one of those that's really strong. And not only that, the bottom's incredible too. But let's first talk about the top. The next 6 times you'd heal someone without ward, give them ward. Now, unless your name's Conrad, this is a good card. So just being able to toss out wards. Now, the good part about this is a lot of times, sometimes I wouldn't actually use the bottom half of Chunk of Flesh, so I end up like taking hits and I have to heal them off. But being able to like, all right, I'm gonna heal myself 4 and then put ward. And then I take an attack 4 hit, but it reduced to 2. And then like just being able to like pop heals back on myself, ward, pop heals back on myself, ward. Suddenly I felt like the name is absolutely right, Survivalist. So that's very strong. The problem I had is trying to juggle 3 trackers at that point was a little rough because every heal burned 2 charges at that point. But it was really fun to be like, hey, I'm gonna long rest. I'm gonna heal 4, get 2 experience, and ward. And they're like, geez, dude. I'm like, I know. So it is very strong. But the bottom half is something I really want to talk about. Because first off, move 2, good. And then loot. So first off, this means that you don't burn a top action looting. Moving and looting is already pretty strong on its action combined in itself. But also, you heal yourself equal to twice the number of tokens and tiles looted. So, if you have continuous health, you can't, obviously you're not going to have, the top of Survivalist in play when you play this. But if you have continuous health, you can actually heal yourself a significant amount while still moving, healing, and looting all in one bottom card. Breakthrough. So the bottom half is another one of where I like because move 4, and then if you end adjacent to 2 enemies, you get a charge back. It's a little more conditional, but it's still strong. And the top half is a big burst of damage because attack 6 with crushing weight, pierce 2. So if you're attacking a pierced enemy, this is at least 8 damage to them. It depends on their shield, but whatever. This is a strong attack. And not only that, but if before you roll, you can be like, oh, this person needs to get more damage on them, burn another charge to add wound. So this is a reliable way to effectively do 7 damage to any enemy and potentially more because of wound. And since it goes first, you might be able to bring, and there's just the way wound interacts, I think it's a very strong status effect. So I absolutely love this card. Both the top and bottom ended up being very critical for my like bruiser build that I ended up using a lot. Accurate Strikes. Accurate Strikes is I like it because it's a very conditional top that also pairs well. Like when I was talking about bruisers like that are just focusing on I don't care about support or tanking, I want to kill those enemies. So you can pair this with Crushing Weight and do significant, just destroy shielded enemies. The problem is not every scenario has shielded enemies. So if you take this as your level 6 card as a big asterisk, like I'll be able to really take on those enemies. Cool, but what if we don't have it? Did you waste your level 6? No, what's the bottom do? Move 2 and then advantage on all of your attacks this turn. So being able to not only reposition just a little bit, but then also gain advantage, especially because you have some capacity to multi-attack, like from, Fierce Barrage, or if you're actually pairing this with, Precision Aim, you can do this with a Draining Arrows to do three shots, or, from your Fierce Barrage's bottom to get another shot in. All of your attacks get this. That's huge. Notice it says your next 6 attacks, not melee or ranged, so Accurate Strikes can go to either build. Consume Stamina. The bottom half is something we used for our spiky ball build, but let's talk about the top first. Attack 2, and then heal at range 4, and the heal is the amount of damage you dealt with the attack to all targets. So if you actually pair this with, like Fierce Barrage, Precision Aim, you can boom, boom, shoot multi-targets out, and then get a large heal on one target equal to that. So I know it seems weird, but you need to actually be able to pair this with other of your tracker effects to do a lot of burst damage onto the single attack action to make that heal really strong. Now, we've seen some really good actions on this. It seems weak at first, but it's one of those where if that's something you want to do, then this will be a good card. But otherwise, I think a lot of people just ended up taking precision attacks just because it's a little easier to use, and sometimes like shielded enemies are frustrating, but this can actually be some really mega heals in certain scenarios. The bottom half, however, is a move 2, decent, retaliate 2, and retaliate on initiative 21's fine. And then every time something next to you dies this round, you get a charge back. And you don't actually have to kill it. It just needs to be adjacent to you and die. And now with Retaliate 2, and if you pair this with Relentless, Retaliate 4, you can watch enemies just suddenly fall apart next to you, gain a bunch of charges back, and be like, hey, I didn't actually burn any Relentless... Oops, 3, 2. I didn't burn any charges off Relentless because all of them died next to me and I got charges back. So it's a strong card. Like the Wind. What if this card isn't even the current version? Because we've revealed it. Anyway, this card changed so many times. I don't even want to talk about the top half because it's going to probably change 15 more times before release. I know you're like, but wait, that Kickstarter update said the final cards for the starters. Turns out that was a lie. There are so many, especially the Geminate. The Geminate, there's been several changes recently. I can't really go into detail, but they're not final. Don't get used to them. They're really similar, so don't be like, oh no, they're so different. No, I mean, maybe this one will be. Who knows what this is going to be. But let's go to talk about the bottom. Move 3, and then for every ally you move through, get a charge back. And so this is for every ally, and not only that, but there's a lot of like movement increasing items that you can get from like boots that you can actually move through your whole team. Funny thing we saw through this is Drifter Bone Shaper, and just move through a bunch of skeletons to get an enemy and get like reset your crushing weight. I'm like, oh, that's really strong, and it's very good. Unending Fight. So I like this because, like I said, you know I like the Bruiser build. So with Crushing Weight, this is attack 4, move 3, attack 4, which is already good. Being able to have a non-loss pair of attack 4s, similar to Vile Assault, except Vile Assault's a loss and has some status effects. This one has some movement between them. So it ends up being a good card. Just being able to, I know it burns through 2 charges, but it, on average, 8 and probably more damage is really good. In the bottom half, see, you've got a good top and a bottom half. Remember how I said it's sometimes hard to manage 3 trackers? Get 3 charges back from 3 trackers as a loss. That's a lot of experience if you can burn those charges again. And it's a good top with a conditional loss bottom that's also really strong. So Unending Fight, I mean, I'd really like to do Like the Wind. It's one of those where every time it changes, I try it out and it's fun, but and it's like I want to like it, but I ended up just favoring Unending Fight most of the time. Against All Odds. This is another one for Spiky, but for the different reasons. So the bottom we're going to talk about first. The next 6 instances of an enemy moving into a hex adjacent to you, they suffer 3 damage. So watch as enemies just die as they move next to you. It's actually good for any build because even if you're ranged or support or tank or melee, just watch enemies. You're going to probably be near the front line with your good health pool. Watch them move next to you, suffer damage. It's strong. But the top attack's great because you can attack 1 every enemy within 2 hexes. Now, attack 1 sounds weak, but with Crushing Weight, attack 3 on all enemies. You're like, well, that's a lot of charges. But then, every enemy targeted with this attack, you get to have a charge back. So, first off, if you need to readjust charges, you can hey, there's 4 enemies within range. Boom, 4 attacks. You can just, if you're like, well, that burned 4 charges from Crushing Weight, just get those 4 charges back. Or you could be like, oh, I'm only going to burn 3 charges back, but then I'm going to get 1 back on this. So even though it does burn a lot of charges, you get just as many charges back. Inevitable conclusion. So if you actually prefer the melee build, the bottom half on this is actually really strong because here's the bottom action with Crushing Weight, attack 5 poison. Attack 5 poison on a non-loss bottom attack is just very good. So it doesn't matter what build you're going for, that's strong. And now if you're ranged, the problem here is you have a melee bottom with a top that's a loss, but it's still good. So attack 4 or attack 5 with precision aim on all 6 of these hexes. 6 hex AoE. That's really strong. And then you can actually say, hey, you know what? I'm going to burn a charge to make sure it has immobilize too. So you can kind of crowd control. Depends on if it's melee or ranged enemies. But if they're melee enemies, you can just immobilize all of them, apply a big attack on all of them, and then say, hey, they're weakened, let's leave them there. Let's focus on these guys because those guys are immobilized, and then next turn, let's go over there and focus on these guys that have weakened with my attack. Just being able to have that sort of concentration coordination makes this a lot easier, and it's even then the bottom half's useful. The top half's also super useful for no matter what build, even if you're doing tank or support. Just being able to toss out a bunch of attack 4s and then potentially immobilize multiple enemies is strong. So I like both cards, and this is the frustrating part about Frosthaven, like class design. It's like so many of the each levels are like, well, which do you pick? Depends on your group, depends on the scenario. They're both good. So a lot of times it ends up being, which do you like more? And that's a much more fun way to play a game than just saying, min, max, pick this, pick this, pick this, drop this card, drop this card. And not only that, but a lot of those things where you like pick this, pick this, pick this, those lack the nuance of what's in your group. And you know, there's a lot of less coordination. So I love having levels like this where I'm like, this is, both of them are super suited to different build paths and different party coordinations, and they're both super. They're good cards. Everlasting. I wanted to like this, but I ended up picking the other card more often. Everlasting. So I didn't like it because you compare it with like shields, and then like the next 4 sources of damage that have 4 or less, you just ignore it. The problem here starts to become that with shield, use shield and ward, if you start doing stuff like that, you end up bringing the charges below 4 anyway. And then now, of course, you could like, hey, I can bring this big attack 8 down to 4 and then ignore it. But you end up burning through a lot of charges. And this is only a 4 charge, not a 6 charge tracker. So I don't like it as much. But the bottom I'm actually very fond of because it's a heal 3, range 3, and then regenerate and strengthen. So it ends up actually recovering quite a bit, especially if you do use continuous health with this, and strengthen on a bottom. So you can use this on yourself, then do it with a top action attack, and then still be strengthened through your next turn, which people are like, oh, I know that trick. But in Frosthaven, because of the way new pips are, thank you, Justin, and just how the new actions, it's really rare to find bottom half strengthens. So I know it's like, what, this is a level 9 card. These are supposed to be broken. Maybe, but the cool part about it is you can burn another tracker to target another person. So you can hand out a couple of 3 heals, then regenerate 2 things, and then strengthen 2 things. You can do it on yourself mid-turn to, you know, have the double strengthen effect, and then have one ally have like a 1 turn of strengthen. So it is still strong. It's a good card. I'm not sure I feel it having the level 9 impact power that I really want from a level 9 card, but I guess that's why I picked the other. We use every part. So here's the thing. It's a ranged attack, attack 4, range 4, and then heal 4, everything next to the target. So again, if you're using precision aim and like continuous health, you can actually like attack 5 and then a bunch of heal 6s. This is ridiculous. So you can actually do a lot of recovery. So the precision aim continuous health build kind of allows you to have less mobility and less melee, but you have a lot of recovery, a lot of support, and quite a bit of and decent range damage in the process. You're not going to be doing some of the big hits some of the other classes are going to be, but you will be competitive the whole time. The bottom has something I really like too. So on an initiative 18, already good, move 3, and then attack X, where X is equal to the number of hexes you moved during this move ability. So something we thought was funny. We're not going to talk about the boots, so let's remove that from the equation now. But move 3, so what if you have sustained momentum and crushing weight in play? Move 5, attack 7, and go like, oh wait, holy shit. So nice little, that's a lot of movement and a lot of attack, and then it's a non-lust card, so you can actually keep repeating this every rest. Now of course, even then, if it's not if you don't use sustain momentum, move 3, attack 5 is already very good on a bottom. Gives you some decent mobility and being able to punch out some damage too. Plus you can pair this with other things, like there's a blink blade ability, and it's number of hexes moved with this move ability. Who knows if it'll make it to live that way. This keeps on bouncing what it is. It was, and one version was basically almost a balanced measure, like with the movable phalanx. That was a little too good. So, but regardless, This is a very strong card. So you can move, hit hard, and then you have the top half to hit hard again. So if you need some like single target burst damage, you've got it here. So which Drifter card are you most fond of? Which kind of build paths do you think you'll be considering when Frosthaven comes out and you're playing a Drifter? Will you be playing a Drifter? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the video, be sure to hit like. It really does help us out. The YouTube algorithm's kind of crazy like that. I just want to give a special thanks to all of our Inox patrons. You guys are all amazing. I love all of you. You're fantastic. And I really appreciate all you do. So just thank you, and thank all of you for watching.